Good evening, everyone. Welcome to an evening with Cameron Davis. My name is Lyle Williams, and I will begin with the land acknowledgement. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land from which I am joining. I'm speaking to you from Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is also covered by Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaty. For those joining from other parts of Ontario, you are each situated on lands with their own histories, treaties, responsibilities. Land acknowledgements remind us that the places we work, live, and learn today are shaped by histories that are much longer than the institutions we currently occupy. Some of you may wonder why we do land acknowledgements. What importance or relevance do they have at each gathering of people? Today, I want to take a different approach for land acknowledgements. And I'll ask if you'll indulge me as I aim to humanize the importance of acknowledging the need for change in settler colonial societies. Can I get next slide, please? I want you to reflect on what you see on the screen right now. I want you to look at this image. I want you to process this image and think to yourself, what is it? What is it depicting? Obviously, it's showing scales, some sort of scales of justice, but look closer. And what do you see? You begin to see injustice emerge, imbalance emerge, imprisonment emerge, confinement emerge. And there's an element of order and disorder. These scales are supposed to measure fairly when in reality, they're not. Could I get next slide, please? That image connects to a powerful statement by Senator Murray Sinclair, former chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, who said, "Systemic racism is the racism that's left over after you get rid of the racists." What he meant is that racism does not only exist in individual attitudes or actions, it can also exist in the structures themselves, in the rules, in the policies and systems that shape outcomes long before any individual decision is even made. If a scale is built unevenly, it doesn't matter how fair the person holding it believes themselves to be. The result will still be unequal. For Indigenous people in Canada, many of the systems we operate within today were built during periods of colonial policy that explicitly sought to control Indigenous lives, lands, and governance. Those policies shaped institutions such as the justice system, the education system, and the child welfare system. Even when the language of those policies changed, the structures often remained. This is where Cameron's work becomes so important. Cameron speaks about how justice systems interact with communities and how historical policies continue to shape present day outcomes. What we see today in areas such as incarceration rates, policing interactions, and access to justice is not simply the result of individual decisions. It reflects the cumulative effects of systems that were designed without Indigenous people at the center, and often explicitly against them. Understanding systemic racism means recognizing that the scale itself needs to change, not just the person holding it. When we acknowledge the land, we are not only recognizing who was here first, We are also recognizing that that the systems built on this land have had unequal impacts on the people whose territories they are. Acknowledging the land is therefore one step. Learning about the systems that shape people's lives is another step. And working together to transform those systems so they produce fairness rather than imbalance is the work that continues. Today's conversation invites us to look closely at the scale, to ask how it was built, who it has served, and how it can be rebuilt so that justice is not something that must be pressed down to be seen, but something that stands balanced for everyone. Thank you.
À l'Opsu-Sefpo, chaque fois que nous nous rassemblons, nous souhaitons la bienvenue à tous les peuples du monde. Nous n'acceptons aucun geste, parole ou comportement indésirable dirigé contre les membres de notre syndicat. Nous témoignons du respect à toutes les personnes, quel que soit leur âge, leur croyance, leur appartenance politique, leur caractère racial, y compris, mais sans illimité, aux peuples d'origine africaine, noire, des Caraïbes, sud-asiatiques, asiatiques et palestiniennes, aux femmes, aux hommes, aux peuples des Premières Nations, Métis et Inuits, aux membres des groupes ethno-raciaux, aux personnes handicapées, aux personnes gays, lesbiennes, bisexuelles, transgenres, bispirituelles et de genres divers, aux francophones et à toutes les personnes dont la langue maternelle n'est pas l'anglais. Dans notre diversité, nous renforçons notre solidarité à titre de membres du syndicat. Si vous estimez avoir été victime de harcèlement ou de discrimination, communiquez avec les personnes désignées pour obtenir de l'aide immédiate. Whenever OPSU members gather, we welcome all peoples of the world. We will not accept any unwelcoming words, actions, or behaviors against our union members. We accord respect to all persons, regardless of age, creed, political affiliation, and racialization, including and not limited to people of African descent, Black, Caribbean, South Asian, Asian, Palestinian, women, men, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, members of ethno-racial groups, people with disabilities, gays, lesbians, bisexual, trans, two-spirit and gender-diverse persons, francophones, and all persons whose first language is not English. In our diversity, we will build solidarity as union members. If you believe that you are being harassed or discriminated against, contact the designated people for immediate assistance.
So for those of you who feel that you need to contact someone, you can contact Megan Carter or Josanne Job, who are both online. I'm going to pass it over to Tina.
Thanks very much, Liz. I have been very fortunate to have been included in the development of the Dismantling Systemic Racism and All Forms of Racism training. Throughout each session I have facilitated, I am always learning new things from other people and seeing the world through their eyes. There are many sections that are covered in the training, and I needed to understand how I got there and why I was so interested in going forward and developing this type of training for OPSU-SIFPO. We look at racism as being conscious or unconscious belief that certain people or groups are inherently superior to other people because they belong to a particular race. Although the concept of race has no scientific basis and is a social construct, racism and racist behaviors do exist. Therefore, racism and racial discrimination are lived experiences. Addressing racism today requires an understanding of how human rights are violated by racist ideas and discriminatory acts. Being anti-racist begins with an awareness of several forms of racism, which includes individual, interpersonal, institutional, and systemic. I cannot stress enough that we cannot assume you know or understand the experience of racialized communities, especially those you do not identify with. Explore your own cultural beliefs and identities before creating assumptions or generalizations about others. We have to practice actively listening, and we've learned that through the Dismantling Systemic Racism training. And having empathy when learning about different points of views or experiences outside of your own. Cultural humility is a lifelong practice and approach to self-reflection that begins with the actual examination of our own identities. This practice can help us to better recognize and change power imbalances that are a result of racism and racial discrimination. Being anti-racism and participating in anti-racism work requires action and policy change. Real change calls for a commitment across communities and organizations to name racism, dismantle systems of oppression, and address the culture of white supremacy. Part of being anti-racist is to hold individuals and institutions accountable and ask for transparency when racialized groups' rights are violated or not taken into account in public policy. Racism is not always conscious, explicit, or readily visible. Often it is systemic and structural. Systemic and structural racism are forms of racism that are pervasively and deeply embedded in systems, laws, written or unwritten policies, and entrenched practices and beliefs that produce, condone, and perpetuate widespread unfair treatment and oppression of people of color, with adverse health consequences. Examples include residential segregation, unfair lending practices, and other barriers to home ownership and accumulating wealth, schools' dependence on local property taxes, environmental injustice, biased policing, and sentencing of men and boys of color, and voter suppression policies. Whether overt or insidiously subtle, racial discrimination touches the everyday lives of Indigenous, Black, and other racialized people in communities in Canada. It contributes to injustice and inequality. Racial discrimination takes on multiple and often intersecting forms, from anti-Black racism to anti-Indigenous racism to anti-Asian racism to Islamophobia to anti-Semitism, among others. Systemic racism Canada runs deep. Our policies, our structures, and our systems have evolved out of and remain grounded in Canada's colonial roots. That is why a key step in dismantling systems, racism, is for our anti-racism work has put us on the right track. But of course, this work is ongoing. It must be continuous, evergreen, and sustainable. The responsibility to eliminate racism, discrimination, and hatred is all of Canada's to carry, not only within OPSU and CEFPO. Together, we can build a society where every person has the opportunity to be safe from racist violence, to thrive, to belong, and to make for themselves the lives that they wish to have, free from discrimination. So, to conclude, it is very important that our leadership and all of our members receive the training. We encourage our new leaders to take the training as soon as they can. Tonight, it's going to be a pleasure to be able to welcome Cameron Davis because it is very impactful video, has definitely impacted our dismantling systemic racism training in all forms of racism. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I'll hand it back to Liz.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you, Tina, for that powerful reminder. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. It's really meaningful to see so many of you here taking the time to be part of this conversation and to continue the work that so many of you have already committed to. Tonight's event is rooted in the training many of you took part in organizing for power, dismantling anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, and all forms of racism. This training was developed with a clear goal to actively identify and remove systemic barriers that exist within our union and in the spaces that we organize in. The training focused on organizing for power, grounded in the work of identifying, disrupting, and dismantling systemic racism within our own union structures, including within our locals and across sectors. This work was not done in isolation. The training was developed through a working group made up of both staff and members. Members from the Coalition of Racialized Workers and the Indigenous Circle, bringing lived experiences, leadership, and accountability into the foundation of this work. And because of you, because of the thousands of members across this province who participated in this training, we received powerful feedback about what resonated most. And one thing came through loud and clear. The video created by Cameron Davis was one of the most impactful pieces of the training. It stayed with our members, it challenged people, and it made a lot of us recognize our own privileges, not just in our union, but in our everyday lives. And because of that, we knew the conversation couldn't end there. We wanted to continue it. So we reached out to Cameron to reconnect, to hear what he's been doing, what he's working on, and to bring his voice back into the space with all of you tonight. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge a few people who are with us this evening. Andrea McCormick and Barb Thomas, thank you. Your leadership and commitment were instrumental in building the first phase of this training. The impact we're seeing today is because of the foundation that you helped create. And I'd also like to acknowledge our president, JB Hornick, who is here with us tonight. Thank you for your presence and your continued support of this important work. And with that, it is truly an honor to welcome our speaker for this evening, Cameron Davis, and I will turn this over to Dr. Crystal Garvey.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be in this space, but more importantly, to our distinguished guest, Mr. Cameron Davis. Everybody knows him from the viral YouTube video, but I just want to share with you who he is. He's a student, a world-renowned activist who's from Ontario. And in 2020, when he spoke at the Black Lives Matter protest, addressing stresses he faces just trying to be a kid, and the speech later went viral. Shortly after, he co founded the BYR Youth, an organization that advocates for Black youth in the region of York and also promotes allyship and community leadership. He's a distinguished leader, and he also shares his message locally and globally, speaking at various engagements, empowering and uplifting students, informing and educating the police, and even our very own government. In 2022, Mr. Cameron, and let's celebrate this, was one of the youngest of 15 Canadians chosen to give a TED Talk in the one and only NYC, or we know it as the Big Apple. He was also a youth leader for the Children's General Assembly, which presented an annual manifesto at the United Nations General Assembly. Cameron graduates from his political science degree at the University of Ottawa this spring and starts law school for his JD in the fall. Cameron pursues his academic excellence, also while designing his clothing name and brand, his merch, which raises money to disenfranchised youth, and being publicly recognized for his praises of social justice work. He's a recipient of many scholarships and awards, including the Malcolm Memorial Award, the JCA Dudley Law Memorial Scholarship, and the Alliance of Educators for Black Students of the Lesman Scholarship. Cameron, I could not be any more proud of you than anyone else in this room. I just want to celebrate you for the amazing accomplishments that you've accomplished in this short little life that you've lived so far. And I'm excited to see where we're going to go next. And I just want to
Yes.
say thank you on behalf of OPSU CEFPO to being here with us this evening in your very busy schedule. Hashtag student life. I know you're on the precipice of exam season, so I know that you have to get your studies in. But thank you so much. And I know today's going to be a little bit of a heavy conversation. So we're going to start off a little bit light. So if you were a song, what song would you be today?
I didn't even have to think. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you everybody in the audience for the applause. It's so heartwarming. I literally cannot stop grinning. I'm super excited for the conversation this evening. To answer your question, it would be Purple Dinosaur by No Big Deal. It's a song about basically Barney and how he taught us how to be empathetic, caring, and loving, and how they love their mom. And that is what I listen to keep me uplifted, to keep me energized, and keep me motivated to keep pushing when I feel down. But it's also
Yeah,
just like a super mellow and super chill song that I like listening to on my walk to class.
I'm going to have to listen to that song because I don't remember Barney being chill more so than the song played so often that it wasn't a pleasant song anymore. Anybody, the laughter's coming up, the emotion. Anybody that knew Barney and that Purple Dinosaur, I'm like, if I hear that song one more time. But yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out. So there's a song for all of us folks in the room. We need to listen to the Purple Dinosaur. All right. Well, thank you so much. So you've been doing a lot. And I want to know, like, since you've done this amazing video, like a million times over, I can't thank you enough. As a mother, having to explain to people all the time, what it's like to be a mom for, a Black man. You showing that video, I would just send the clip. I'm like, he shares the story. He at the end. But like since this viral video, what has been happening with you? What's the journey been like?
The journey has been incredible and surreal. After I posted that video, like you mentioned, I really liked being involved in the community and I didn't trust what was currently being done. So I was asked by an adult mentor in Vanessa Stobie to co-found BYR Youth.
Yeah.
And I was head over heels on board. I co-founded that organization. We had our first panel, one in Toronto, one in Georgina, and one in Newmarket. And then we expanded from there. We were able to host a Black Youth Gala 2 years ago, and now we're hosting one May 31st this year. Um, in other aspects, I was using that organization to emphasize my community work and volunteering, and that led to other opportunities. So I was, like you mentioned, speaking in Billund, Denmark about the inequitable access to technology between Western states and the rest of the world. I became a co-host the year after and was a mentor to other youth from the ages of 6 to 18. And then I used those two accomplishments to pitch to become a candidate to give a TED Talk. And then I was one of 15, the youngest of 15, to give a TED Talk talking about how Gen Z should be using their voice to make change and how my organization and I am living proof of that because of my travel experience from a young age. Um, and then after that, I was speaking as a panelist with TVO on the importance of reconciliation and allyship and leadership with youth. Um, I've been commended by murals across all of Canada, and I'm still working. I've gone to law school now, so my trajectory is on track. It's so surreal to think that it's been 5, almost 6 years since I made that speech, and I'm beyond thrilled that I'm still on track.
That's amazing. And again, we can't be more proud of you. Uh, so shamelessly, I'm going to put a plug in for you. You're going to have to share that information regarding that gala because I know many people are going to want to ask. So we're going to put it in the chat and we'll make sure that we disseminate that information regarding your gala. Again, May 31st. So we'll make sure to get that out there. And before we get into the second question, I just want to feed into it. So, traveling to the eastern side of the hemisphere and giving talks and inspiring, and you said something that was very important. There were differences. Can you share some of those differences with us? Like, what did you notice different from the western side of the world versus the eastern side of the world?
100%. I completely forgot that last summer I was actually in Mexico for a field research course.
Yeah.
And then that last fall I was in Shanghai for international exchange. So I've been traveling for school and I've also been traveling for international diplomacy. In my trip to Billund, the biggest difference for me was the lack, like the people don't trust other people. There was a lack of unity, and I feel like that's everywhere. There's not like one place of the world that believes that, but people said that it was super reassuring to have somebody as positive and optimistic and easygoing as myself there when I was a mentor, because that wasn't a case for them back from where they were from. And there was a lot of distrust back where they were from. And being able to be in a space that was new to them, where they were anxious and still feel welcomed and comfortable, uh, was something that they didn't take for granted. And it made me realize the importance of just continuing to be accommodating, empathetic, and considerate of other people's opinions and ideas and values and norms. Since a young age, I was traveling around the world. My mom's a travel writer. So as of now, I've been to over 40 different countries. In the second grade, I skipped a year of school to travel around the world for a year. And we visited 29 countries in that year alone. I have a really wide idea of what is considered normal because I've been exposed to so many different norms growing up, and being able to apply that, whether it was in Mexico last year on a field research course studying food, gender, and political inequity, or in China on international exchange where I learned Mandarin and politics. It was so insightful to use those foundations that I learned and those internal values that I've made for myself and apply it in those situations.
Wow, that's amazing. So we're about to play a clip. And so as you're about to play this clip, I want you to take a moment to reflect. And in this reflection, we want to get in your brain. That's really what it is, right? Part of the conversation. We want to learn what was your why and what was happening in your life in this as we play this clip. Like you said some things and we want to know why. What was your why behind it? So we're going to play the clip now and I'll wait for our wait for our IT team. There we go. Looking at yourself is surreal.
It's so jarring.
16-year-old student who attends Markham High School. Let me tell you a bit about myself. I'm an honor roll student. I've been on 2 championship basketball teams. I'm a published writer for national and international publications. I'm a regional youth council representative. I'm a YouTuber and a clothing designer. I'm a teen traveler who has visited more than 45 countries. But when you saw me stand up here today, you wouldn't have known any of that. Instead, you likely noticed that I was black, and that's okay.
Yeah, that is so pretty. It's so cool.
Yeah,
I think,
so
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I think that the why for making that video was bigger than me. It was because, well, the story is that my teacher told me that racism doesn't exist in Canada. I was doing a presentation. It was our final presentation for the year on police carding by the Toronto Police Force. And I was saying that they were disproportionately targeting Black youth and Black men. And we had evidence to prove that. And we used the whole idea of racism, systemic racism, as like what causes bias. When we went to present it, they told me that most of my evidence was using American sources and that racism doesn't exist in Canada. So I got the lowest grade I've ever gotten in my high school career. And at first, I was so shocked because they were denying my own lived experiences. And I spoke to them about it, and they doubled down on their beliefs. So I talked to my parents, and they were like, "Well, no, you know this. You've been learning this. Go educate them." And for a week, I just came back from Chatham, Kent, which is a town in southwestern Ontario that is really rich in Black history and Black Canadian history. So I was ready. I had so much knowledge, and I educated my educator. I got my principal involved, my parents involved, and I made sure that they knew where they were wrong. And then I shared that speech on YouTube. And the reason why I shared it on YouTube instead of just stopping at the protest was because of how much positive feedback I got from sharing it at that protest. There were so many people that were saying that their kids, their nephews, their cousins didn't hear this and needed to hear this so that they could be confident to speak out as well. And I was so anxious. I was so scared to speak out at that protest to begin with. I was so scared to make that video. My hair is not picked out in the video because I didn't think it was gonna go viral, and it did. And I'm so happy that it did because it's been touching people's lives and it's been changing who people think ever since. So the why was for others, and I'm glad that it's being received by others.
And I'm so grateful that you didn't let fear stop you. And then more importantly, that you were able to reach out to community, i.e., your parents, and say, hey, this is a barrier. And they were able to support you in that journey. And I think that is one of the great lessons, even out of hearing your story, that, this is one of the reasons why community is important. And it's important to, like, even when you're afraid, to find a way to to overcome fear. Because a lot of times it's just in our head, but it's not necessarily the lived experience. So thank you for that. And that kind of builds on to our next question, funny enough. And so we would like to know, like, what helps you, stay, um, focused and disciplined and committed, grounded. So, a lot of big words I'm throwing out here. And what are your supports and what does that look like? And what keeps you going?
Hmm.
I know it's a loaded question.
I think that for me, I'm grounded because I'm optimistic. I know that there's lots of
Mhm.
conversation around whether or not the work that any social justice activists are doing are is going to be sustainable. And if it's not
Yeah,
sustainable, what's the point in trying? And
yeah.
what I see is that the work that I'm doing, no matter how small, is a step further than the people that came before me, and it's
Mhm.
transitioning that legacy. I don't
Yeah.
think that I'm going to solve every issue, but being able to pass the torch onto the next generation or the next activist, and I see so many bright youth today, it gives me a sense of optimism. I'm also grounded because of my support system, like you said. First of all, my parents, they are probably my biggest supporters. They've always had faith in me, but they've always been okay with telling me when what I was saying made no sense. They have not hesitated to correct me, to educate me, and that's what you
Mhm.
need in your circle.
Yeah.
My peers are my biggest supporters and the world, like the internet. I don't know everybody's faces that are rooting for me behind the scenes, but last year I had a school in BC. Their name is let me find it. Upper Lynn Elementary School in British Columbia. and they gave a door mural. They made like a door poster about my TED Talk, about the Teenage Life Being Back in Canada video, and what it means to be a leader and an ally. And that school, that elementary school doing that was like it genuinely made me cry. I didn't know that my message was reaching that far, and that inspires me to keep pushing. That's what keeps me grounded. It's really nice to do the work. It's extremely nice to get the recognition, and then it's cyclical. That keeps me going.
How ex how exciting is that? That, who would have known, like British Columbia, like we already know that you're international superstar. It's not a question. But when it comes back to home and you have those, intimate connections, I can only imagine how meaningful that is. And, kudos to your parents to continue to, be that pillar and, to the community overall. And so with that being said, we're going to play another clip for you, right? So the viral clip, here we go again. And what I want you to think about, or what we want you to think about is if you're thinking about those people in positions and, and people that say they feel powerless, like we're amongst members of our union who have to navigate an employer that sometimes they're not there necessarily to support the employer or support the community,
Mhm.
right? As you know, organizations are driven by the dollar, not necessarily
Mhm.
by the impact it has on people. And so we're going to play this clip, and I want you to think about, you know with regards to how people in positions that feel powerless, what would you want to say to them? And thank you so much. There we go. Had to,
Me,
there we
a
go.
15-year-old kid, to bring in books about race and racism in this country from home just to convince an adult. I shouldn't have to explain why, if someone says the N-word or any derogatory slur towards minorities, it's wrong. Why am I the one doing this? We're the adults. We're the people who make the decisions, people who are in the positions of power, the ones who work in our schools, our community centers, our governments, our courts, our stores, our healthcare systems. They are in the seats that have power. They can change the system and dismantle the systemically racist institutions. They can make room for black youth like me and other minorities so that our voices can be heard, so that change can happen. Don't mistake my anger, sadness, and frustration here today with pessimism. Don't be discouraged. I'm not. Black people are creative, innovative, intelligent, and optimistic people. We are resilient and strong. This backbreaking labor of fighting systems isn't new for us. We've survived in spite of it for generations. We have come this far and we aren't going anywhere. Instead, take this as a call to action. Acknowledge the system isn't flawed. Admit that it was made the way it was to give privilege to people who designed it. And then get to work dismantling it. Question, call out, and displace white privilege in every place you find it. Use the creativity, intelligence, and innovation we have as a community in Markham and find ways to make long-lasting change. I mean, look around. This diverse group of people all came together to support a Black Lives Matter protest. That's a good first step, but it's only the beginning. If we can come for something like this and come together on a Saturday afternoon, I know that we're smart enough to come together and solve this issue and create an anti-racist Markham for all. The question is, do you want to do it? And if so, the time is now. Black lives can't wait. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, so it's a double-sided question. So just to reframe, the first half is, what do you want to say to those that feel powerless? And then the second half is, what is the commission that you want to share to those that are architects of influence or those that are in power?
For those that feel powerless, I understand that feeling. I think that I felt powerless in a lot of situations in my life. I did lots of corporate work, even with volunteering and social justice. You get into positions and you think that they're going to listen to you, that there's going to be change, and that you're going to see it within the next year or two. Whether it's like reform or representation in the school curriculum, that's a lot of the work that I did in education. And it's super disheartening and discouraging to realize that they don't do it. They put it aside. They say they're going to do it later. It's frustrating, and that's why I was angry in that speech. For those that feel powerless, I urge you to shrink in the goal. Start with yourself. start with your own accountability, start with your own intentions, and then do it outside of the workforce. Be mindful, especially now, there's so many limits because what you do outside of work can obviously come back to bite you. And that is such a that's a systemic issue in itself. But to hold yourself accountable, to hold those that you're close with and care with accountable, that's the first step. And then for those that are in the positions of power, if you have issues with them, you have to talk to them privately, talk to them in a manner with respect and stay cordial, but under find ways to educate them on their misunderstandings. And then for those that are in power, you need to be open to listening, to learning, and then to acting off of it. That's my mantra. If you were able to have that conversation with an employee or with a colleague, where they're saying that what you're doing is wrong, don't be shy around that conversation. It's meant to be uncomfortable and it's meant to be um, it's okay if you feel anxiety or anxiousness, but the conversation still needs to be had. And I will never blame somebody for having that conversation or for raising that issue that they have with their coworker and then moving proactively after that. So, to answer both questions, the first is if you feel like you aren't able to do something, if you feel powerless, start with yourself. Start with holding yourself accountable. That's the biggest step. Bring it to your families, bring it to your peers, bring it to your close circles. And then I hope that the people that do have power here today are listening to me as well and believing that when these coworkers and colleagues come to you and express that they have discomfort and express that they feel unsupported, that you are at least giving them the chance to speak their minds and listening to them as well.
So I'm going to ask another question to build on that because I th what you're saying is so critical, especially for those in the room. Uh, you made mention of, there's places or moments where we're uncomfortable. So, as a teaching moment, what are some things that you do in the space when when you know you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable?
I think for myself, I think bigger picture. I It always makes me uneasy to talk about like, oh, that's a microaggression. Oh, that's rooted in something else. Oh, this is inconsiderate of another group. Because people are unaware of these things to even begin with. Um, I choose my battles, definitely. I'm selective of it. But when I'm uncomfortable and when I know that this is the time and place that it needs to be said, I say it. Um, there's a pride in having that confidence in the moment, and I know it's hard, but it's something that I had to overcome when I was 15 to give that speech. Um, and then understanding again that it's bigger than yourself. Like when I was anxious. I genuinely did not want to give that speech because I was like, this
Yeah.
is my own experience. This is something that's probably not happening anywhere else because I had no idea that it was happening. I was so young. And
Yeah.
my parents were the ones that told me, no, you need to give this speech because you don't know how many other people need to hear this story, how many other Black boys are not getting the right mark that they deserve because they don't know how to. They don't know how to communicate this. They don't know. They don't have the uh, they know that it's happening, but they don't have the evidence, and you have the evidence, so you're in that position of power. And I had to put my fear aside. I had to put my anxiety aside. And I did it actually with anxiety and fear. So doing it with anxiety, doing it with fear, and doing it uncomfortable is completely fine. You don't need to be comfortable in the moment. Your heart will be pounding, you'll be sweaty, and that's okay as long as you get it done.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And everybody's loving the response. There's a question. I'm going to deviate for 2 seconds. There's a question from one of our attendees this evening. And the question is, you talked about anger being a motivator. What emotion or stance do you encourage people to take instead of anger? What a great question. And I'll repeat
That's a
it.
really great question.
You talked about anger. Oh, it disappeared off the screen.
I have it though.
Oh, you have it? Okay, great.
I think it needs to be balanced, so I'm going to say joy. There needs to
Mhm.
be um, a lot of hope. And with hope, I definitely see joy because I would not be able to keep working. I would not be able to keep fighting if I didn't have that joy in my life. I think that I'm a very positive person. I think that I'm extremely optimistic. And yes, I do feel anger. Yes, I feel like so many negative emotions. But it's important that you don't let that swarm you, because once it swarms you, it does blind your judgment. And then you aren't able to effectively make the progress that you want to make. It just becomes, it seems hopeless. And I want there to always seem like there is hope. And the way that you do that is by managing how you take breaks when you feel like your mental health is deteriorating. You step back. That's what I did for an entire year, actually, because it's draining. The work of social justice, the work of activism is extremely draining, and being filled with that much anger and constantly hitting barriers, it exacerbates that. So
Mhm.
remaining joyful, prioritizing your own mental, physical well-being, um, and yeah, using that anger to fuel that joy, to fuel that passion, so that it doesn't blind you.
Yes, thank you so much. And that wonderful response. And yeah, the emphasis of engaging in self-care and knowing when, as an activist, just to, as one would say, put yourself on a timeout. And that is just as
Mhm.
critical as doing the work. So thank you for that. And another question from our community is, glad to hear that you are a traveler. Do you find there is a shift in understanding equity outside of North America? What an amazing question.
Yes, there is. I spent 4 months in Shanghai last semester, the fall semester, from September to January 9th. I actually came back this year because the sequence is different.
Mhm.
And one of the courses that I took there was international communications, and it focused on international communication within China. So we were learning about race, equity, inclusion, allyship, from like a Chinese perspective, and that was so fascinating because and being an exchange, you're with people from all around the world, and I was the only black kid in the class, and I thought that my teacher was going to use me as like the sheep to basically explain and give the whole gist, but they were educated and they were able to explain to the rest of the class, because they studied in America, what race is, what racism is, how it's systemic, what's a microaggression, and how you can navigate these issues. Isn't that insane? How you can navigate these issues collectively. And then we played a game, and the game was, I remember it's a very old game, and it was basically saying like, why is this not politically correct? Or why could this be
Oh yeah, I know that game. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it was like there was so much education happening in the classroom that didn't happen at home, that didn't happen up until now in my university or high school or anything, but it was happening here, and that surprised me. There's obviously going to be microaggressions, prejudice, perceptions of you as an individual all around the world, and that was the case everywhere I've been. But it was cool to see that in this education space that there was an attempt um to educate its youth.
You had me speechless for a second to have an education outside of North America, and they are more aware about race, racism, microaggression, discrimination. And so that kind of leaves me speechless in some sense, because you would think that because we are post slavery, that we would be more aware of the narrative that we're navigating. But those that are outside looking in have a hypersensitivity to the lived experience. So, did it make for your experience then, to build on that, to be more an inclusive learning experience versus what you experience here?
Learning there was definitely more inclusive, and learning there was outside of the classroom as well, because it was
Mhm.
exchange. The course load wasn't too difficult, so I was studying in class, but at the same time I was traveling a lot, and while traveling I know a little bit of Mandarin. It was enough to get by. I was speaking to people. I was speaking to youth, and I was speaking to like their parents about like how they like China, how they like the community, where I could find good food. And
Mhm.
um all of that was there was I was met with kindness at every step of the way. There
Mhm.
was there was looks, there was glances, but whenever I spoke to them, whenever I broke that barrier, or photographs, I was a paparazzi star. But whenever
Mhm.
I spoke to them, there was interest, and there was kindness, and that was really cool.
That's so amazing to hear, and I'm grateful to hear that that experience has been So amazing and so fruitful. And so as we continue our conversation, you're emerging leader, business owner, public speaker, author, as the list goes on and on. What advice or what sentiments do you hold near and dear when it comes to qualities of a leader? So what are some, attributes that a great leader needs to have?
I think that they need to be adaptable, they need to be open-minded, and they need to be curious. Those are the three
Mm,
big ones. The fourth one, I'm always going to say it is optimistic, joyful. Um, Maybe if you have a sense of humor, that helps. But the main four is
mhm,
optimism, accountability, adaptable, and curious. Because those are the four things that I feel like you need to navigate any issue that you come into. That leads
mhm.
into your resilience. It leads into your critical thinking. And by having those fundamental four, I think I was able to accomplish and overcome a lot of challenges that I faced.
Yes.
It's led to my growth.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. So thank you for that, and thank you for those important tidbits for us to take away. Back to our community. Another question for you. You encapsulate, and I hope I'm saying this right by what was typed here. You encaps. Oh, it's going really fast, the chat. You encapsulated, or I guess you had talked about frustration, anger, and pain of many Black and racialized people with your speech. You put in words what we experienced. As a parent raising a young Black child, what did your amazing parents do to inform, prepare, invigorate you to speak so powerfully at such a young age?
That's a great question. They, I was, before I went around the world, I was super shy. So I think it was the exposure that changed me. And you obviously don't have to take your kid around the world to achieve that. It could just be putting them in like opportunities where they have to speak, where they're getting outside of their comfort zone. Because I was put in a position where I had to get out of my comfort zone at a very early age. At 6 years old, I was meeting people from all the across the continents. That made it so that when I had to speak later on, I was obviously still scared, but in my like my inner heart and my inner soul, I was like, wait a minute, I've done this before. Like these are just people. They're interested in what I have to say. I've I've been bit by a toddler around the world before. If I get something that happens to me now, it won't be the end of the world. I kid you not, I was bit by a toddler in Cambodia because I went to
Oh
give them a
no.
hug and they bit me right in the stomach and everyone was laughing. laughing. But anywho, my point is, um, they put me out there, and then when I was out there, I realized that it wasn't as scary as I thought it was. And then after
Yes.
I did it, I realized that that wasn't so bad. So then I kept doing it,
Yes.
and then each time it was scary, and then it wasn't, and then it's scarier, then it wasn't, and that's what motivated me to keep speaking.
Mhm.
Let me read that again. Um, yeah, so putting your kid out there at a young age, I think like opportunities or like programs like Toastmasters helps a lot. They're getting how like learning how to speak publicly helps.
Mhm.
Um, and I also like spoke in front of a camera a lot. I was a YouTuber for since 2017 until like 2022, and then I stopped just like the film. I have so much content. Anywho, sorry. Basically,
No, that's awesome.
it's yeah, it's to speak at a young age and to be comfortable speaking about things, and then it becomes easier to speak about specific topics. Um,
Mhm.
Race wise, I was also given a lot of books at a young age. My
Mhm.
dad gave me a lot of like psychology books, like I was reading like Nexus, Homo Sapiens, Atomic Habits, the Seven Habits of Highly Effective Teenagers or people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is. You're right. Yep.
And
I know the book.
those like reading those books earlier on, like early on, was one just intriguing to me. Even though they had to force me to at the times, but
Mhm.
it was it helped because it made me realize that we're just bigger. Like the whole like humanity as a collective is just so much bigger than the individual, than what our differences are. And then the combination of those two of travel, of learning about the importance of unity, and then of those books talking to me about how it's important to use your skills to help others made me want to speak, and then I kept speaking. I also
Okay,
did read
one.
my fair share of like Greek mythology and other stuff too. I wasn't just read. Don't just give your kids.
Yeah,
Don't just give your kids
yeah.
Atomic Habits. Like give them other
Yeah,
things.
no, you gotta make it fulsome. I want to say that there's members that are putting in the chat, Cameron for Prime Minister. I agree. Definitely needs to be Prime Minister. We're rooting for you. A couple more questions. There's another question here. One of the members of our community is asking, what do you think of Walk for Peace by Buddhist monks in 2025, 2026 that's happening in North America? And where we were we trying to bring all people together?
I think like personally, I didn't. I guess it happened last fall probably because I didn't hear
Yeah.
about this. I think that anything like that is great. I think that there should be a bigger normalization in society to help other groups. Allyship is so important and it goes beyond anyone's singular issue or collective issue if it's a big group. Um, I think there's so much intersectionality in the world now too that supporting others is crucial. And yeah, like the opportunities like that where you can learn about other people's culture, learn about other people's religions, that type of open-mindedness is what's going to make it easier for us to make change going forward. Because when we get into positions of power as youth, or when you guys get promotions, you guys know how to navigate those issues because you have people that you've associated yourself with that are suffering from the negatives of it. I think
Yes.
that's all it is. It's when you're closer to people that have experience these things that only they can experience because of their origins, it makes it
Mhm,
easier to tackle them head on.
mhm. Okay, well, we have one more question that we're going to ask from the community, and then we're going to go to our final question that is like the burning question. And it's from another member from our community, and they would like to know, have you had the chance to learn about in which ways AI can deepen racial bias? And
I
what are your
have.
thoughts around AI? I know that's a big question.
It's funny. I've been doing so much, well, political science, I guess. I've been doing so much research about artificial intelligence, and law. But yes, AI is such a like multifaceted tool. It definitely has the potential to deepen racial bias, which is why there needs to be so much regulation surrounding it. Um, but I also think AI is super powerful, and when monitored correctly, when we're looking at what data we're giving it, and then we're teaching it how to um, interpret bias, then it will be
Mhm.
more sustainable, and it will be more useful, and it will probably dismantle issues as well. But uh, yeah, it's just the negative, I think, of early stages of a new transformative technology, and it's unfortunate.
It's quite unfortunate. And yeah, I echo the sentiments. There's a lot of work that needs to be done around AI. I forgot the gentleman's name, and you probably may know, but the one that created it and did the Nobel Peace Prize speech and saying AI is a very dangerous tool and no one's listening to him. And he
Hmm.
created it. Just
Hmm.
saying. uh, Food for thought. But here's the last question, because our time, I can't believe how fast this time has gone by with having this conversation with you. It's just been so uplifting and edifying and all the amazing things. And the question is, if you had to do this speech today, what would it be now?
Ooh, I think it would be surrounding that it had like that it. Oh, okay, okay. There's two answers I have for this. The first is if I have to
Yeah,
do the speech
go for it.
again now, it would be completely different because like the success happened. It would be talking. It would be there'd still be anger. There'd still be
Mhm,
frustration, but it would be a lot more university focused, Ottawa focused, holding people like in Parliament accountable. And then I would talk about my involvement in other communities. So two terms ago, so like last winter semester, I was working for the Legacy of Hope Foundation, which is an Indigenous-based organization in Ottawa. That's a not-for-profit that does a lot of work in analyzing data, hosting events and stuff like that. And then I've spoken at at high schools here in Ottawa about the importance of leadership and allyship, and speaking to them and them being inspired to get into community service work because of me is exactly what I'd base the speech off of. So it's the importance of using your voice again. It's the importance of getting into positions where you are the one with the steering wheel, or you are the one with more power than you had before, so that you are holding yourself accountable, which was something you were already doing before when you didn't have the power, and now you're gonna do it like better than anybody else.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what it changed to. And then I was thinking that I should do the speech again now that it's been 5 or 6 years, and
Yes.
basically talk to my younger self and say, like, you did it. Like, you are in law school now, you're still on the right track, you're still on the right pathway that you wanted to do. And even though, yes, I'm differentiating from wanting to go into politics entirely, it's still on the table, maybe. But
Mm.
yeah, like being able to say that I've achieved all these things now is is a blessing. And my younger self, I hope, is proud.
I want to say your younger self is super proud. And I know that you definitely have been not only an inspiration to the up and coming generation, but an inspiration to all of us in this space and saying, it's okay to, face your fears. It's okay, to speak up, that it's okay, to be uncomfortable with, be comfortable without being uncomfortable. It's okay to challenge status quo. It's okay to be a part of community and find your community. Like you just affirmed everybody in one pocket or another and just continue to do the amazing work that you're doing. And I couldn't be any more proud, like any of us in this room, that if you were the auntie, the sister, the mom, the brother, the father, like all of us, are behind you and supporting you. And we're expecting, because you said it, so now we're going to commission you. You got to do a part two of the video, especially since it's been 5 years. And, speak to your younger self, but also speak to, the generation that they are experiencing what you experienced then. I will say that while things have changed, how much has really changed? How much has the needle
Mhm.
really moved? And I do believe that, with your voice being on the platform that it is, I do believe that the young people need to hear, how they can, be the impetus to change for the community, especially when those that are in power are not necessarily listening and they themselves have to take on that responsibility of being the architect of influence. So Mr. Cameron Davis, on behalf of OPSU CEFPO, we are so grateful for you. We celebrate you, and we are excited to see what's to come. And as you can see, the love is overwhelming.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it so much.
And so thank you to everyone who attended this evening. We want to say thank you again to Cameron Davis for taking time out of his extremely busy schedule. I just want to plug, it is exam time for him. So it is busy season, and he took time for us this evening to be with us all the way from Ottawa. And we just want to say thank you, and we appreciate you. And to all of our community members who took the time this evening to out of their busy schedule to be with us, thank you so much. And we can look forward to having conversation. But more importantly, here's the plug, Cameron. Remember, Gala May
Mm.
31st. Second plug, if you haven't done your DSRP training, you got to get yourself registered, find out when the next one is happening. If you need one organized for your local or for your community, please make sure that you reach out to your local president or whoever within your community to get it organized. If you know someone that hasn't done their DSRP yet and you know it needs to be done, here's a great opportunity to have a conversation to make sure they have their DSRP training planned and organized. We are here ready to go. This is just the beginning of the amazing things that we're going to be doing with OPSU CEFPO. Have a great evening, everyone, and be well and be safe. And I'll leave it. I'm not sure what's next in the agenda. Member strategies. So yes.
Yeah, that's certainly very hard to follow. Thank you so much, Dr. Crystal Garvey, and specifically in being able to have Cameron Davis with us tonight. Obviously, very inspirational, and specifically in regards to the changes and the things that of lived experience that Cameron Davis had been able to allow us to be able to experience. And we're very proud of OPSU CEFPO and being able to bring back Cameron Davis in regards to being able to see what the changes were like in regards to from highlighting his first video that was involved in all of our facilitation and training for the anti-racism in dismantling the systemic racism and all forms of racism. So, well, again, Odessa, Austin, we do have a number of panel people in regards to for myself, Holly Sullivan, Dahlia Campbell, and Michelle English. And so I'd invite Odessa Austin to be able to unmute and to be able to talk about the strategies that have been very successful for her.
Thanks so much, Tina. When I was asked to speak about the strategies I'm using with the dismantling systemic racism and all forms of racism, being a DSRP trainer, I looked at my local and I wanted to make sure that everybody in my local was trained. And we all had taken the training, but there was a couple news stores that had not. And also being on my CAT S full-time DivX, I realized that I could take on this project to make sure that all of CAT, not just our support, but also looking at full-time academics and looking at part-time academic and part-time part-time support could be trained as well. So this is a big undertaking that I've taken on, but I'm going to tell you, it has been very successful. Been able to reach out to local presidents and find out who, if they need training, and be able to break down those barriers, which we did hear at convention, where some people are saying they weren't able to get the training or they were waiting longer times for it. So being able to work with Megan and get the training in for our CAT people has been amazing. And I'm, proud to say that we're on our way and making sure that all executive members that are on CAT are being trained. So my name is out there. And if you are a CAT member that has not received the training, and we definitely can get that training to you, to reach out to us so that we can be able to say that all colleges supports has been trained. I would put the challenge out to also sector chairs and other DivEx as well. Take on this fight and to make sure that we are, as it's been said in the Constitution, that we're supposed to be trained within 60 days of being elected. So let's make sure that we can get this done by reaching out to your sector chairs and your DivExs to make sure that this gets done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Odessa. Okay, so as we hear from our members, if other people also have strategies that they've used, please feel free to put it in the Q&A and share, or you can also email it to dsrp@opsu.org. So next is Holly Sullivan.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So until I took the DSRP course in 2024, I hadn't thought much about a day in 2011 where I took my friend, who is Jamaican and a Black woman, to Costco with me. And as I listened to others speak in the class about their experiences, it brought me back there, and it brought me back to how I handled it. And did I make it worse? Did I make it better? What could I have done differently? And in 2011, I didn't see the systemic piece. I saw one racist woman. After speaking with the manager, I saw a racist man, and not the systemic part. For my friend, I wish I would have brought it up later to ask her about it and to see if she wanted to speak on it, and to ask her if I did anything that made it worse and to apologize. But at the time, I thought that since I'm white, she probably didn't want to talk to me about it. And realistically, part of the reason I didn't bring it up was because I felt awkward and I was uncomfortable and nervous. So now I think, well, if I felt that way, imagine how poorly she felt, how uncomfortable and nervous and awkward she probably felt, right? And then just because I was an ally to her for a few minutes didn't mean that she felt the space I would give her would be safe to have that conversation. So my biggest takeaway from the DSRP course are the realizations that we have to have the difficult conversations. So now I try and force myself past the discomfort to find a way to have them. I make space where I can, and I try and make the space as safe as I can. So I focus on what I can do, not what others aren't doing. And I'm a talker, so conversation is something I can do, especially with people who I get kind of vibe that they don't really understand what the systemic piece is. And I also recognize it's not the job of those carrying the systemic traumas to constantly relive them to teach it to everybody else. So this is where I think I can help. And a common occurrence for me, and maybe a lot of other people have this too, is when you're sitting around a table, well, for me anyway, when you're sitting around a table of people who look the same as me, who are Caucasian, and you bring up the topic of equity and how we don't have seats at this table that resemble all of our members, you know, depending on the group, I may point out, if I'm very good friends with people, I know that there's no hidden heritage that I'm not sure of. I'll say, do you see a Black person or an Indigenous person, a Chinese, a South Asian person? You can name a bunch of different races and cultures and say, do you see that at our table? So people can start to visually connect with what you're saying. And I hear comments, so it shouldn't matter what color our skin is. We all share the same values here at the union. Or how would we fix that? Or I didn't do anything wrong. Or just because I'm white doesn't make me racist. Or well, what about the other people that aren't here? And well, we don't want division by singling anybody out. And sometimes I get really mad, but I take the opening. So when people have the comfort or courage to say those things that they think might be wrong or racist, I try and say whatever I think can make a conversation of it, right? I do have to know my audience. But what can I say to get folks to have another step deeper on what they're thinking right now? Because in my opinion, they're not thinking about the systemic piece. They're thinking about themselves and the I am not a racist piece, right? So I try and explain visually how someone cannot see themselves in a leader and then not see themselves as part of, and that doesn't match the goals of our union. And the other thing is it's different strategies for different groups, but I learned that yelling and grandstanding to a group of peers about all the injustices of systemic racism just doesn't usually get me where I want to go. And as someone who is Caucasian, it really isn't always my story to tell. The other thing is I follow different social medias of different influencers from different races and cultures and heritage than my own. And I make sure that it's not just, oh, I found one good Indigenous channel, I'm going to follow that. No, I want different topics and aspects within all those cultures and heritage. And then I try and share that on my social as much as I can and learn from it as I'm watching it. And I find that, I'm going to keep learning and listening the best I can. And I just never assume anybody else's story. So that's kind of what I've been doing and what works for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Those are really great strategies and reminders for all of us. And next we have Dahlia Campbell.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm a staff rep in Region 4, the Kingston office, and recently I got to bargain a contract for a hospital, Quinty Health, and the bargaining team was made up of 6 Caucasian women, and one of them had taken the DSRP that I actually facilitated in the Kingston office maybe 2 weeks prior to us having our first bargaining meeting. And what we were able to do is they were able to get an extra seat on the bargaining committee. So there were 6, they made it from 6 members to 7, and they designated that 7th seat for equity deserving member, Black, racialized, or Indigenous. And that's going to be the first right of refusal. And then if they can't get anybody in that main group, they might get somebody from the LGBTQ plus I community or disabled community. That's what we were able to do. And the employer gave us a bit of pushback at first. They kind of wanted it to be designated for a member that was either part-time or had low seniority, not necessarily equity deserving member, but they pushed and fought for it, and we were able to get that into their local provisions. So we're really happy for that. And I know for a fact that if this course didn't exist, that wouldn't have been an idea for the bargaining team to bring up. And I'm excited to do another meeting when bargaining comes around again and electing a bargaining team and letting the Black, racialized, and Indigenous members of that local know that there is a spot at the table waiting for them and it's theirs. So yeah, I'm excited to bargain more contracts and keep trying to get equity language throughout all our contracts in OPSU SFPO.
Thank you, Dahlia. That's a really important piece because staff do a lot of the important work with our members. I'm going to ask Tina to share some strategies.
Thanks, Liz. So, as an extract from the Dismantling Systemic Racism, I'm very excited in regards to that for a number of years now, that the blanket exercise has been included on the day just prior to the start of convention. And as well in regards to being able to do that, to be able to provide education and awareness in regards to the issues that impact Indigenous peoples the most, as well as in regards to being able to further in regards to of extensions that we have been able to introduce. And it's going to be introduced specifically in region number 1 in June. And so that for people that have attended Indigenous Journey courses number 1 and 2, that they have completely changed. And we've added an Indigenous Journey course number 3. And so as a result of that, there's further education and awareness in regards to of things that are very closely connected to the dismantling systemic racism training that we have all experienced. And so it's good to be able to go back and to be able to re-energize and reintroduce the impacts that Indigenous people face in terms of within the systemic racism. And as well, in regards to being able to work with our counterparts we've been able to look at working with the Provincial Women's Committee for region number 1 with Sue Fairweather, and that we have held 4 different ribbon skirt making events and being able to provide the education in regards to about the origins of the ribbon skirt making. And so, a lot of that has taken away the assumptions, taken away the biases, have been able to deal with some of the discrimination and the harassment that Indigenous people face. And so I'm really glad that we're going to be able to introduce the 3 new Indigenous courses that are completely different that OPSU CEFO has offered before. And to be able to work with so many great people in being able to organize that education and making sure that we do have the facts and that they are up to date. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Tina. And we have one more member who would like to share, and then after Michelle English shares her strategies, we'll have Tina jump back on to wrap up. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks, everyone. So I'm currently sitting on the Sector 18 Mental Health and Addictions Committee, and I'm in a new role that was enshrined the first term for the first time. So it's called the Human Rights, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator. And so that role was recently enshrined. We advocated with the EBMs to request for supports, and a lot of EBMs saw the benefits of having this position in place. This came as a result of the DSRP. And I understand now that there might be even another sector that has enshrined the same role. So that's one of the big changes that has happened within the sector. Secondary to that, we also advocated to have equity identifying seats, extra equity identifying seats secured so that we could bring in more new members and more equity identifying members to participate in bargaining. So to your point, Dahlia, again, I really like that idea. I definitely would like to see that happen with our union. And for me and for our sector, I think what we really want to see is we want to see folks who have never had any experience with bargaining come, because the very first time that I went through that experience myself, being surrounded by people who knew so much, the amount of knowledge that was in that room, I had goosebumps. And it was really positive. It felt great to know that at some point I'm going to know the same, I'm going to have the same knowledge as well. And I'm going to be able to share that with others. So I think it's so important to be able to foster education, but we got to create the space for that purpose. So that's another one. There's a lot of other things that I'm currently working on, such as equity snapshots. So again, when we have our bargaining conferences, bringing all of our because we're a sector, we've got regions, lots of different regions within that sector, and so bringing folks together, having collaborative talks, and looking at what are some of the equity initiatives that you're doing within your local. Um, Considering barriers, challenges, what are the recommendations that you have, and then coming up with some commitments and innovative ideas. And so I'd like to continue with that, continue to build on it. One of the things that I recognize about this is that doing this work, we tend to be very siloed in it. And because I initially was the only person in the human rights, equity, inclusion position, I wanted to know where my community was. And so for me going forward, that's what I would like to see, is building that community. I know that we've got our equity EBMs, and we have the Provincial Human Rights Committee and all of the other equity committees that exist. I'd like to see where we can kind of pull together and bring folks that are doing equity work, doing human rights work together to talk about strategies and share resources. Because if we're not doing that, um, where we are contributing to inequity, because what that means is that you've got other communities, other regions that are doing great work for their regions, and then some regions where they're not really benefiting from those same supports. I can speak for Region 5. We're huge, and I know that there's a lot of equity work, a lot of great work that's happening here, but we're so siloed. And so it's so very important for us to kind of bring folks together. So those are some of the initiatives that I'm working on. DSRP, back when, like, learning about the living wall, being part of convention when the equity seats came into place, seeing Megan Carter receive an award, um, all of those things, it really touched me. It really pushed me, Dahlia as well, going into her position. Um, these are all things that push me to say, hey, there are lots of leadership opportunities within OPSU, and we need to be working together to support each other. So, so important. Atasha's another one. I can see that she's also putting in some messaging in there too. Again, moving ahead, leadership. So there's a lot more to be done, but these are a few examples of what we're currently working on. If there was more time, I would talk to you about all the strategies at my current workplace, but definitely something that stuck with me as a final point that I will say is that Cameron's right. At some point, you get to a point where you have to just speak out. You have to just focus on what's important, what's at the root of it, what are our human rights, and to fight for those rights, to fight for those those inequities. And having an employee resource group, I think, is an excellent strategy. It's definitely one of the things that I'd like to promote, because we have now, I think there's 9 employee resource groups within my organization. I'm part of the Black Employee Resource Group. I'm the co-chair for my ERG. And we've done things like establishing budget lines, having private space where people can have restoration, um, having social events, and we're working towards mentorship and peer support. And so I just want to encourage folks to do this work. If you see me around, let's connect, because if these are things that you're working on or would like to work on, then I want to be there for that as well. And shout out to Odessa. I have the same idea, and I'm actually slowly working on helping to get the SRP completed within our sector as well. So I'm right behind you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and specifically for being able to acknowledge the work for Odessa. I know that I want to acknowledge Elizabeth and specifically for people that are on the call this evening. Awesome and amazing. Thank you so much, Cameron, for being with us this evening. It's been a great acknowledgement to be able to understand what you've been through and what you continue to do as being a very provocative speaker in all of the education and awareness that you provide. And I appreciate in regards to that everything that we've been through together on this, carpet ride for dismantling systemic racism in all forms of racism. And so I want to be able to thank you because as an Indigenous person, we are always set on the right road. We try and travel the right road and to be able to respect every other person that we come into connection with and that we absorb their education and awareness and to be able to try and connect so that we can exist equally in the safe space that we do have and the brave space that we do have. So I appreciate that for everyone that has been on the call today. Oh my goodness, there have been so many participants. And I want to acknowledge everyone that's been involved in being able to create this beautiful webinar tonight. Because the fact that it is important that we continue the training, the facilitation, and that our members continue to be able to be uplifted, to be able to rise up against anti-racism and anti-Indigenous racism and all forms of racism. So thank you very much for all of our speakers. Thank you very much for all of our panelists. And I very much want to thank all of our staff and everybody who were the organizers for this webinar tonight. I love you to death, and thank you very much. Miigwech.